Sometimes when you look at certain people, you just know that they are extremely stupid without even talking to them. This is because of their facial features. The face is a direct reflection of intelligence, and in this video I'll prove it to you. You will learn how the eyes, eyebrows, hairline, and even the forehead can indicate a person's intelligence through strong evidence based on the human physiology and many other subdisciplines. You will also learn the indications of different facial features through the science of physiognomy, which is the science of identifying people's characteristics and personality traits through their facial features. We will discuss the average IQ of different countries, how factors such as language shape cognitive patterns, and many other factors that can affect a person's intelligence. By the end of this video, you will be better at differentiating between stupid and smart people. The eyes are very important to observe when trying to predict if a person is intelligent or not. By just observing those two individuals, you can see directly that they lack intelligence. Both have eye problems. Each one of the eyes of the person on the left is pointing in a different direction. Both are extremely obese, so their brains are slower. All of this is an indication of a brain that is not functioning well. To understand the relationship between eyes and intelligence, we should go back to the basics. Your brain uses different senses to gather information. Your eyes gather information by detecting light reflected off objects, which passes through the cornea and pupil to be focused by the lens onto the retina. The retina is literally a part of the brain. It is connected to the brain through the optic nerve. Both of the brain and the retina are built from the same components, so the retina is considered a part of the central nervous system. Now that we know all this, we will look into different types of syndromes, different types of mental disorders, and obesity to understand how poor eye health is linked to cognitive problems. The mean IQ of a person with Down syndrome is between 40 and 55. For Fragile X syndrome, it is between 40 and 50 for males and 70 and 80 for females. The mean IQ for people with Prader-Willi syndrome is between 60 and 70. So usually people with these types of syndromes have very low IQ compared to the normal population. They are also more likely to suffer from poor eye health. For example, people with Down syndrome are very likely to have strabismus, which is basically having crossed eyes. They are also more likely to have amblyopia, which is a type of poor vision that usually happens in one of the eyes. They are even more likely to have refractive errors, which are vision problems that make it hard to see clearly. People with Fragile X syndrome are similar. They are more likely to suffer from different eye conditions. The same goes for people with Prader-Willi syndrome. So even if someone with these types of syndromes passes an eye test, their vision would not be the same as a normal person. Also mentally, they would not be the same as a normal person. The next types of conditions that we will look into are ADHD, autism, and schizophrenia. ADHD is considered to be a mental disorder. Autism is generally classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder, and schizophrenia is considered to be a mental illness. Similar to the syndromes that we discussed previously, people with ADHD, autism, and schizophrenia are more likely to have eye problems. As we can see from the pictures, the autistic kids on the left tend to have different eyes compared to the non-autistic kids on the right. Their facial expressions and eyes are very different. Here is another example. You can see that the eyes are not normal. This person has schizophrenia. His eye area is also not normal, and his eyebrows are also not normal. In physiognomy, the eyebrows reflect the mental state of a person. These are some classical pictures from the 1800s of people with different mental illnesses. As we can see, the eye area is not normal, and their mental state is not normal. So just like the people with the syndromes that we just discussed, people with autism are more likely to suffer from different eye problems. The odds of having crossed eyes are 4 to 5 times higher in autism compared to the general population. People with ADHD are 5 times more likely to suffer from convergence insufficiency. And people with schizophrenia are more likely to have reduced contrast sensitivity. This is one of the strongest visual defects in schizophrenia. So people with the mental disorders that we just mentioned are more likely to suffer from different eye problems compared to the normal population. So now we can see a pattern between proper eye health and proper brain health. You can also observe how people process their thoughts through their eye movements. I want you to remember what you ate 2 days ago. You will notice that you will gaze in a certain direction to try remembering what you ate. When you want to plan something, or when you think about something, you will also gaze in a certain direction. This is called gaze aversion during cognitive processing. So when you talk about something complicated to a person with low intelligence, They would freeze and stare at you with an open mouth. This is because they are not able to process what you have said. As I mentioned previously, the retina is a part of the central nervous system, so it is logical that eye movement indicate cognitive processing. There is also a connection between nutrition deficiency, obesity, and eye health problems. Fat people are nutrient deficient in general, despite eating a lot of food, because they usually eat unhealthy food, so missing certain nutrients can cause obesity and eye health problems. Fat people also have slower brains. They have slower brain signaling speed compared to a healthy person, reduced sympathetic plasticity, and lower energy efficiency, which can cause many problems, because the brain needs a lot of ATP for energy. So being nutrient deficient can make a person less intelligent and overweight. The lack of certain nutrients will affect both brain health and eye health. Obese people are not the only ones deficient in nutrients. Schizophrenia has been linked to vitamin D deficiency. People with ADHD tend to be deficient in vitamin A and vitamin D. People with autism also tend to have vitamin D deficiency. So all the examples I gave you show that there is a strong link between good eye health and proper brain function. And all of this can be observed from the eye area. Everything is connected. So a person with bad eye health will become more intelligent if they fix their eye problems, because their brain performance will also improve. But this will depend on the eye condition. If someone has blurry vision, for example, because of metabolic dysfunction, or mitochondrial inefficiency, or poor sleep, then improving those factors will improve visual clarity and cognitive performance. The same goes for obese people. Getting slimmer and healthier will improve cognitive function. This shows you that lifestyle and nutrition will affect the intelligence and health of a person. Another thing that can severely affect a person's health and intelligence is the lack of sunlight. Sunlight is not only important for vitamin D, it is also important for mitochondrial function. Red light from the sun stimulates mitochondria to increase ATP production. Your brain and eyes contain mitochondria-dense cells because they require a lot of energy. In this study, people who were exposed to red light showed improved vision. So companies try to sell you something that you can already get for free. Sunlight is free, so this is something to consider. Now we will go through different eye variations and their indications through the science of physiognomy. This will help us understand how people with those facial features tend to think. The first eye variation we will discuss is eyes with minimal upper eyelid exposure. This eye variation is the opposite of eyes with exposed upper eyelids. Single eyelids are the same as eyes with minimal upper eyelid exposure in terms of the characteristics they indicate. This variation is very common among East Asians. People with minimal upper eyelid exposure are analytical. Analytical here doesn't mean that they are logical or intelligent. We can't conclude that from one facial feature. It just means that they tend to have good concentration and focus. So if you're interacting with someone with this feature, you would expect them to ask questions more often and frequently. That's why they are described as investigative and having curious mindset. East Asians tend to be like that. Even their language tend to demand more focus and concentration, because it heavily rely on pattern recognition. Eyes with exposed upper eyelids are the opposite. People with this feature dislike overanalyzing things, and they prefer to get to the core of things. That's why they tend to prefer quick results. We also cannot conclude from this facial feature alone that someone is intelligent or not. Not all intelligent people think in the same way. Eyes that are close together indicate that a person is precise and detail-oriented. People with this eye variation are also described as analytical. You can think about it like this. A person with close-set eyes is sharp-eyed and quick to react. A person with minimal upper eyelid exposure would overanalyze and concentrate and focus when looking at something. So it is not always the case that a person with close-set eyes would overanalyze things, but you can have a combination of both eye variations. Eyes that are wide apart are the opposite. These people struggle with small details. They tend to be daydreamers and they are prone to distraction. But they are good at seeing things in the bigger picture. So they are not rigid like people with close-set eyes, and they are open-minded. This feature alone doesn't indicate low intelligence, but people with this facial feature would probably be bad at things that demand too much precision. Deep-set eyes indicate that a person is introspective, reflective, and a deep thinker. So usually it is harder to read people with deep-set eyes compared to people with protruding eyes. People with deep-set eyes are described as deep thinkers and reflective because their emotions don't show up easily. So this will reflect on both their personality traits and the way they think. Protruding eyes are the opposite of deep-set eyes. These people are more expressive and animated. They are also more likely to be impulsive and spontaneous compared to people with deep-set eyes. So in comparison, the person on the right is more self-aware and reflective compared to the person on the left. Narrow eyes, or eyes that have straight top and bottom lids, indicate that a person is watchful and observant. So this guy has deep-set eyes and minimal upper eyelid exposure. So he is introspective and he has strong focus and concentration. His narrow eyes add another layer, so he is watchful and observant. These characteristics will also apply to his personality traits, the way he thinks, and how he interacts with people. A negative canthal tilt indicates that a person focuses more on the negative side of things rather than the positives. That's why they tend to critique a lot. So if a person with this eye variation is intelligent, then this can be an advantage, because they would always try to minimize the flaws in things they are doing. So now that we covered the eyes, we will move on to the eyebrows. The eyebrows are very important because they can reflect the mental state of a person and how they process their thoughts. They can also reflect the energy levels of a person, which can directly affect the energy of the brain. The lady on the left with the thicker eyebrows has better cognitive function compared to the lady on the right because her thyroid function is much better. She is also much healthier. The eyebrows reflect the health of the thyroid, and the thyroid has a very important role when it comes to the brain function. The thyroid gland significantly influences sex hormones and reproductive health. It is also a regulator of metabolism, mood, and cognitive function. The thyroid is one of the most neurologically and hormonally influential glands in the body. Also, the thyroid acts like a control system for your brain's energy. It helps your brain turn glucose into usable energy in the form of ATP. So when it's working well, your thinking, focus, and mental energy will improve. When the thyroid is low, it pushes eyebrow hairs into the resting phase, where they stop growing and fall out faster than they can be replaced. So a low thyroid will reduce the energy in your brain and in your body, and will cause the eyebrow hairs to become sparse. Women are more likely to suffer from thyroid problems for a couple of reasons. One major reason is that they avoid the sun and use sunscreen and other products that block sunlight. In a study, red light therapy treatment was very effective in normalizing thyroid volume in female patients. In another study, red light therapy treatment was 70 times more effective in increasing T3 to T4 ratios. So as I mentioned previously, you can get a lot of red light from the sun. Sunlight is crucial for mitochondrial function. Mitochondrial dysfunction can impair thyroid hormone production and activation, and thyroid dysfunction directly reduces mitochondrial ATP. So it is like a self-reinforcing metabolic loop. You shouldn't look at each body part individually. This is a reductionist mentality. Different body parts work together and depend on each other. Other psychological factors can directly influence the body and the face. In physiognomy, short eyebrows indicate a weak connection to people in the private and social life of a person. And if a person is not bonding with people, they will have low oxytocin levels, and low oxytocin can elevate cortisol, which can lead to hair loss. So this can be the result of psychological factors. The health can also affect a person psychologically. Problems can arise from the combination of multiple factors. Different eyebrow shapes and variations can reflect a person's mental state, emotions, and many other things. So the eyebrows are one of the most important things to look out for when analyzing people. Now that we know all this, we will go through some eyebrow variations which can help us understand the mentality of people we are dealing with. Thick eyebrows indicate high energy and vitality. Thick eyebrows on their own don't indicate high intelligence. They just amplify the characteristics of a person. In other words, if someone is intelligent and they have thick eyebrows, then they would have a lot of energy to utilize for their mental activities. Some people are not intelligent, but they do have thick eyebrows, so they would still have high energy, but the high energy would not be useful for intellect because of their low IQ. Thin eyebrows are the exact opposite of thick eyebrows. Those people have lower energy compared to people with thick eyebrows. You can find people with thin eyebrows that are intelligent, but they wouldn't have the same amount of energy to use for mental activities or other kind of activities like people with thick eyebrows. Different eyebrow shapes can reflect how a person thinks and how they process their thoughts. For example, eyebrows that are thicker at the beginning indicate that a person is idea-driven. So a person with this eyebrow variation would have the tendency to come up with many ideas, but they tend to be bad at completing what they have started because their focus tends to shift at the end. On the other hand, eyebrows that are thicker at the end indicate the opposite. These people tend to procrastinate or delay starts, but they are better at completing what they have started, so they are great finishers. We can also say that they usually are not idea generators. That's why they can improve and benefit from others' ideas. Sometimes you might find eyebrows that have scattered hairs on the outside. This reflects that a person is interested in and curious about many topics. A perfect example is Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster. His podcasts cover many different topics because he is interested in many different topics. Also, his other facial features amplify those traits. For example, he has minimal upper eyelid exposure, so he is focused, and he has an investigative mindset. The eyes and the eyebrows are only a part of the puzzle. The combination of the overall facial features, plus other factors that we will talk about after we are done with the facial features, will help us precisely tell if a person is intelligent or not. The hairline is one of the features that can reflect if a person is very knowledgeable, but it doesn't necessarily reflect high IQ. The reason is stress. For example, when you study something for a long time, you will get stressed, and the stress can make you go bald. An example of this is the German scientist Max Planck. His hair fell off because of the stress he have experienced from studying quantum mechanics. These are some pictures that went viral of engineering students before they entered the university and after they have graduated from university. The same thing happened to them. Their hair fell off because of the mental stress they have experienced. Chronic stress can increase the production of cortisol, as shown in the following graphs. A normal person would have normal cortisol patterns throughout the day, whereas a chronically stressed person would have higher cortisol throughout the day. Over time, this high cortisol can accelerate hair loss because it forces the hair into a resting phase. While it is commonly believed that hair loss is caused by DHT, I personally think that this is not the full truth. The reason is many clinics treat baldness with red light therapy, and many patients, whether they are male or female, benefit from those treatments. As we can see from the bottom left picture, this patient is 60 years old, and he got significant improvements in his hair from this treatment. As I mentioned previously, you can get a lot of red light from the sun, and it is significant for mitochondrial function. Many old pictures of Bedouin Arabs and Native Americans show that they had very thick hair. One of the big reasons is probably sun exposure. It might not be the only reason, but it is certainly a big contributor. Other factors such as food quality and water quality are also big contributors. So there are many factors that can affect the human health. Psychological trauma is also one of the factors that can cause hair loss. In physiognomy, a jagged or an uneven hairline indicates that a person has experienced trauma during adolescence. An uneven hairline is more common among females because females don't experience baldness like males, so their hairlines would probably not change as much during their lifetime compared to males. So with that being said, if the hairline is receding to the point of frontal baldness, then this would indicate that a person is an overthinker. It might also indicate that a person has a high thinking ability, or that a person is knowledgeable, but this would vary from a person to person. Some people might get stressed from overthinking because of daily life issues, and some people might get stressed because they are trying to gain knowledge. A low forehead or a low hairline indicates that a person is practical, so these people are action-oriented in thinking. They may have too much practical knowledge in select topics or few topics. For example, this is a famous YouTuber in the business niche. His name is Alex Hormozi. He has a lot of knowledge about business and topics that are related to his niche. But when it comes to other topics, he probably doesn't have as much information based on his facial features because he's not an overthinker. He's a very practical person. A low hairline might also indicate that a person struggles with intellectualism or overthinking because these people prefer action. So if you're interacting with someone with this feature and you're talking about a topic that they are not interested in, they would probably not engage much in the topic because they are not overthinkers. Now that we have covered the hairline, we will cover the forehead area. The forehead is very important when it comes to intelligence and thinking traits. The forehead can directly reflect a person's thinking ability and their thinking style. When you observe a person's forehead from the side profile, there are three main types of foreheads to look out for: the round forehead, the straight forehead, and the slanted forehead. The round forehead is considered to be a feminine trait, and the slanted forehead is considered to be a masculine trait. The skull of a very feminine female would be smooth and less robust. The skull of a very masculine male would be sharp and very robust. So if we compare them side by side, a very masculine male's skull would be much more robust compared to the female. The face has hormone receptors that directly influence the facial features of a person and their appearance. That's why people who abuse hormones experience very significant changes in their facial features, as we can see from the examples in front of you. The brain is also full of hormone receptors, and it is one of the most sensitive organs to hormones in your body. In a study, they observed the brains of people who were given estrogen and other drugs. The brain of those people changed over time. There was a change in the white matter and mean diffusivity. Hormones like testosterone, for example, can influence your decision making, your emotions, your beliefs, and many other things. The brains of males and females operate differently because the way neural connections run in their brains is not the same, as demonstrated in the picture in front of you, and hormones significantly influence this. I strongly believe that there is a hormone receptor to receptor link between the face and the brain, but there are still no studies that can confirm or refute this. But if you observe the facial features of people who abuse hormones, and if you observe their behaviors, you can clearly see a pattern. So with that being said, a round forehead indicates nonlinear thinking and imaginative thinking. These traits apply to many females naturally, because this is a feminine feature. This feature also indicates that a person dislikes rigid systems, because they are imaginative in how they think. A slanted forehead, on the other hand, is different. It indicates fast thinking and quick decision making. This is a masculine feature, and many masculine males are usually quick in decision making, generally speaking. This feature doesn't indicate high intelligence. A person can be quick in decision making and fast in mental processing, but this will not guarantee intelligence. These traits can be useful sometimes depending on the intelligence of a person. In general, many traits can be positive. And like I mentioned previously, not all intelligent people think in the same way. Different people operate differently. The straight forehead is in the middle. These people have a linear thinking style, so they don't skip steps or jump to conclusions like people with slanted foreheads. And they are not nonlinear in thinking like people with round foreheads. They prefer sequential processing and step-by-step logic. That's why they need clarity and structure when trying to understand something. So if there is something that requires careful analysis and doesn't need to be done quickly, then these traits might be useful. The forehead size is also an important aspect to look out for, because it directly correlates with brain size. In a study, birth weight and head circumference correlated with IQ and motor performance. In another study, brain volume had a correlation with intelligence. In this study, ethnic groups that had larger brains on average had higher IQ on average, and the ones that had smaller brains on average had lower IQ on average. Also, children within the same ethnic group who had larger head sizes had higher IQ scores. So with that being said, a broad forehead indicates strong thinking ability and high intelligence. It can also indicate strong planning ability, and it might indicate strong mental focus if the eye area is good. A high forehead is similar to the receding hairline we discussed previously, but the difference is that a person with a high forehead naturally has a high hairline, but not necessarily a receding hairline. So this feature indicates that a person is an overthinker. They are naturally drawn to theories and ideas, and they have the tendency to get detached and lost in their own thoughts. Eyes that are far apart would amplify those traits, because as we discussed previously, those people are daydreamers. Also, a high forehead might indicate high thinking ability, but a broad forehead is a much better indicator of this. Now that we have covered the forehead area, we will go through some face variations that will be useful when analyzing people. The combination of a large lower third of the face and a low forehead is a strong indicator that a person is not mentally oriented, because a low forehead indicates that a person is practical and not an overthinker, and a large lower third indicates that a person is physically oriented and that a person is inclined towards physical activities. So you can tell by just looking at this guy that he's not an intellectual. Most of the time you should trust your intuition. If the upper part of the face is large and the lower part is small, then this would indicate that a person is mentally oriented rather than physically oriented. So those people usually dislike physical activities, and they are sensitive to stress. The muzzle, which usually refers to the mouth, lips, and the chin, is helpful to analyze, but it doesn't directly reflect if a person is intelligent or not, but it is useful to know. If the muzzle is flat, then this would indicate that a person is more likely to think before speaking or acting, and it also indicates that a person is self-contained. Certain features like deep-set eyes or a small mouth would amplify those traits. A protruding muzzle is the opposite. It indicates that a person is quick to act or speak, and that a person is more likely to struggle with slow decision making. So this is one of the features that can amplify stupidity, but on its own it doesn't indicate that a person is intelligent or not. But if someone is stupid and they are quick to speak or act, then this is a problem. Cardi B is a great example. She's not an intelligent human being. There are many different facial features that can help you understand the people you are interacting with much better. By learning physiognomy, you can understand the tendencies of people, their personality traits, information about their interpersonal relationships, and many other things. So if you want to learn this powerful science, you can reach out to me through Telegram or Instagram to register in a course that teaches you more than 150 different facial features, so you can analyze people like a pro. You can also reach out to me to get personalized face analysis services. The links are in the description and in the comment section. Everyone who got their face analysis says that their results were accurate. I share all feedbacks on Instagram if you want to check them out. Now that we have covered everything related to the facial features, we will go through the average IQ of different countries and explain how different factors, such as language, faith, ethnicity, and gender, play a role in the intelligence of a person. This information will be useful because not all people are the same, and people from different places think differently and are different on average. So the map in front of you shows the average IQ of different countries. You can argue that those numbers are not 100% accurate, but they are fairly accurate. Just to make things clear, smart people exist in all countries and ethnicities, so these are just averages. One of the highest IQ countries are Western countries and East Asian countries. East Asians have the highest IQs on average. There are also other groups of people with high average IQ. Keep in mind that I'm not from any of those countries that I have mentioned, so I'm not biased. A high average IQ is very important for the advancement of countries, and it is a very strong predictor for the success of those countries. All of the industrial revolutions happened first in the Western countries because of their high average IQ and because of the nature of the people living in those countries. East Asians are also very smart, so they always keep up with the Western world. East Asians have higher IQ on average, but Western countries tend to be more innovative on average. Intelligence and language have a strong relationship. Mandarin, for example, is a very hard language to learn because it requires a lot of pattern recognition. It is also full of symbols, and Chinese people are very good at pattern recognition, so the nature of their language is similar to the nature of their people. There are many studies that show how language shape how people think and how language affect their decision making. I even asked AI to evaluate Mandarin, German, Yoruba, which is an African language, and Arabic. This is not a strong case study by any means, but it is good to give us an idea about different languages and how these languages shape the thinking of their native speakers. So each language was evaluated based on 5 different random texts, and 500 words from each text. According to AI, in Mandarin, thinking is pattern-based, meaning is often hidden, and readers must connect clues. Also, according to AI, Mandarin acts like a pattern detector. This description aligns perfectly with the nature of the Chinese people. According to AI, in the German language, thinking is system-focused. Cause and effects are tracked carefully. Ideas are organized into structures, and nothing is left unexplained. So this language acts like a system engineer. This description also seems to be true. Germans, for example, are very good at building machines and systems. Germany has also produced many scientists. When you hear made in Germany, you directly know that the product would probably be high quality. Also in the Yoruba language, thinking is rule-based and situations are matched to known patterns. It focuses on what to do rather than why it works, and outcomes matter more than explanations. So the language is simple, and the people who speak this language tend to be simple. So in this example, the simplicity of the language correlates with the average IQ. Sometimes the language can become simpler over time, and people can become less intelligent. For example, modern-day Arabic is a joke compared to old classical Arabic. According to AI, classical Arabic is the second highest in complexity from the languages that have been evaluated. But the average IQ of Arab countries is not higher than East Asian countries, despite the language being higher in complexity, according to AI. This is because the language has become simpler, so a language can devolve over time, and this will directly lead to lower intelligence. Some might argue that most Arabic speakers are not original Arabs, but to be fair, even the original Arabs are not more intelligent than the Arabized Arabs. The reason I'm saying this is because you need to analyze the facial features of a person, and you need to look into other factors such as their beliefs, traditions, culture, and so on. And you need to see how the person in front of you is communicating their thoughts. This will help you know the person you are dealing with much more effectively. This classical paper shows how the National Adult Literacy Survey scores and IQ are connected to the outcomes of a person. People who scored lower on this test were more likely to be out of the labor force. They were more likely to live in poverty, and they were more likely to live on food stamps. There was also a correlation between higher literacy levels and higher IQ scores. Lower IQ people were more likely to be unemployed. They were also more likely to live in poverty, and they were more likely to make worse life choices in general. Higher IQ also correlates with a bigger brain size. So on average, East Asians have the biggest brains compared to other groups in this study, and they had the highest average IQ. That's why you should observe the forehead size when analyzing people. So let's imagine that we are in a different universe, and there is a group of people with foreheads that appear to be huge, but their average IQ is low. In this scenario, this group of people would have smaller brains on average, but they would still be mentally oriented, but their mental capabilities would be limited to their IQ. Another thing that would be useful to observe when analyzing a person is to see how religious the person is. Extremely religious people on average tend to be less intelligent, but this doesn't apply to all religious people. So just to make things clear, I do believe in God and religion, but to be fair, extremely religious people on average tend to be less intelligent because they don't think much and they tend to follow blindly. This study shows that there is a correlation between having lower intelligence and the tendency to be very religious. You can apply this concept to many things, not only for religion. For example, if someone is very gullible and they believe things blindly from authorities, then they would still have lower intelligence even if they were not religious. This applies to many people who got education or a degree and think that they have true knowledge, because usually they memorize what they have been told without thinking much. Henry Ford, for example, did not study industrial engineering in a university. Despite that, he is considered to be one of the most influential pioneers of industrial engineering. A person who thinks that they know better than him just because they have an industrial engineering degree would be considered very stupid. The reason is Henry Ford have built entire sophisticated systems without having a degree because he's a very intelligent person. People who think that they are smart because they read a couple of studies or because they have a degree are usually not intelligent. So this is something to look out for. When it comes to differences in intelligence between males and females, there are some things to consider. The average IQ of both males and females is similar, but in the extremes there are more very high IQ men and more very low IQ men compared to the female population. That's why the bell curve that represents women is narrower. So many women will be closer to the average. Another thing to consider is that the brains of males and females operate differently because of hormones, as we discussed previously. Because of this, men and women usually have different interests and different proclivities. For example, women in professional occupations tend to work more in education and healthcare, according to the 2023 highlights of earnings in the USA. Another thing to consider is the different types of intelligence. I personally don't believe that this theory is 100% true, because some people are just stupid. But regardless, this theory is worth considering. Some people tend to be very good at certain things. This might be because their brains are wired differently, or because of the experience they gained from doing something for too long. But realistically, it is very unlikely to find a person who is good at everything and that understands all subjects easily. One thing that is worth mentioning also is that different beliefs or cultures tend to value different things. So for example, East Asians are very intelligent on average, but most of them might not be socially intelligent. Other cultures, for example, might encourage socializing, so the people might be socially intelligent, but they might not have very high IQ. Different people are different, not everyone is the same, but there are always exceptions to the rule, so not everyone from the same culture would be exactly the same. Now we will analyze some people and apply some of the knowledge that we have covered in this video. So as we can see, this guy is very obese, so his brain is slow. His eyebrows are also sparse. This is an indication of a bad thyroid, which means that his brain is slow because of low energy. He also has facial features that reflect trauma. His hairline is uneven, so he has experienced trauma during his adolescence. Also, one of his ears is higher than the other, so he has experienced neglect or separation from one of his parents during childhood. And finally, his mouth is downturned, so he carries sadness. So we can conclude that he is mentally confused and he has slow mental processing. This guy has a high forehead, so he is naturally drawn to theories and ideas. He has minimal upper eyelid exposure, so he has strong focus and a curious mindset. The minimal upper eyelid exposure will amplify some of the traits of the high forehead. As we mentioned previously, people with high foreheads often get lost in their own thoughts. So overthinking plus an investigative mindset equals to more overthinking. He has sparse eyebrows, so he probably has a bad thyroid. So his brain is slower because of lower energy. But this doesn't necessarily indicate that he is stupid. He's not stupid. So now if we consider other factors, he is probably East Asian, so his language is probably complex in pattern recognition. The average IQ of his region is high, and his profession is related to technology. Based on all this information, we can predict that he's very analytical, and he thinks a lot. Plus he's East Asian, so this decreases the probability of having a very low IQ. We don't know exactly what his job is, but anything that is related to technology requires some sort of intelligence. He also looks like a nerd, so he's probably smart. But usually people like this are socially stupid. This guy has deep-set eyes, so he is a deep thinker and reflective. It is also hard to read him. He has a very broad forehead, so his thinking ability is strong. He also has a flat muzzle, so it is less likely that he would act or speak in a stupid or impulsive way, because he is reflective. Deep-set eyes and a flat muzzle would amplify each other. His eyebrows are also very thick, so he has high energy. High energy plus high thinking ability is a strong indicator of high intelligence. So considering other factors, he is probably Indian, but I'm not certain. The average IQ of India, according to the map that I have showed you previously, is 76. We don't know his profession and we don't know anything about his language. But this doesn't matter because based on the combination of his facial features, he is not stupid at all. So in this case, the average IQ of his country won't matter. So we can definitely conclude that he's an intelligent person, and he is self-contained. This lady has somewhat of a broad forehead, so she might have a strong thinking ability. But if we look at the lower third of the face, we can see that it is smaller compared to the upper third. So she is mentally oriented. This increases the probability that she is intelligent. Her eyebrows are very thick, so she has high energy. High energy plus a strong thinking ability is a strong predictor of high intelligence. Her eyebrows are long, so she has strong interpersonal bonds and a strong connection to people. And her eyes are narrow, so she is watchful. So based on this, she is less likely to be socially stupid. A small mouth would amplify this even more, because it reflects that a person is reserved, and that a person thinks well before speaking. We don't know her language, and we don't know the average IQ of her country. She might be European. We also don't know her profession. But regardless, this person is intelligent based on the combination of her facial features. According to the internet, this lady has an IQ of 228. She goes by the name of Marlene Vos Savant. So let's assume that this is true, and we are certain that she is intelligent. By analyzing her facial features, we can know how she tends to think, or her thinking style. So she has a broad forehead, so she has a strong thinking ability. Her hairline is also wide. This indicates that she's an independent thinker, but this feature doesn't necessarily indicate high intelligence. Her forehead is somewhat low, so she is practical. She's also not an overthinker, despite being intelligent. Exposed upper eyelids indicate that she dislikes overanalyzing things. So the combination of a low forehead and an exposed upper eyelids tell us that she doesn't usually think about something for a long time, and that she prefers to get to the core of things. Her eyes are also deep-set, so she is introspective and reflective. We can conclude from the combination of all her facial features that she is an independent thinker with high mental capacity. She thinks deeply about things but doesn't overanalyze, and she prefers to know the core of things rather than every single detail. This guy is a fighter. This picture was probably taken while he was training. That's why he looks mad. We can observe that he has deep-set eyes and minimal upper eyelid exposure, so he's introspective and reflective. He thinks about things deeply, and he has strong focus. He also has an investigative mindset. But despite that, he is not mentally oriented, because his forehead is low, and his lower third is large, so he's more of a physical person. So he's not an intellectual person despite being reflective and introspective. His eyebrows are thick, so he has high energy. This high energy is focused toward his physical activities more than his mental activities, because he's a physically oriented person. In this case, the language and the average IQ of his country will not help us, because based on his facial features, His IQ is probably not high. This is the end of this video. If you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to share them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to learn more about face reading.